I didn't realize the weight she was carrying until I heard it fall softly, accidentally, out of my husband's mouth. It was a Tuesday evening, the kind that smells like reheated soup and tired bones. The house was quiet in that way only lived-in homes get after years of routine. The clock above the stove ticked louder than it should have. I remember thinking how time sounded heavier lately, like it was dragging its feet just to get through our days. My daughter, Lila, had just left an hour earlier. She'd hugged me longer than usual at the door, her arms thin around my waist, her cheek pressed into my shoulder as if she needed to borrow some strength. I'd smelled the faint trace of antiseptic on her sweater, mixed with her lavender soap. At the time, I told myself it was nothing. People smell like places they've been. Hospitals. Old buildings. Other people's lives. Drive safe, I'd said, smoothing her hair like I used to when she was small. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. It never had lately. After she left, I stood at the window longer than necessary, watching her taillights disappear down the street. Mothers do that, I suppose. We watch our children leave, even when they're grown, as if our eyes can keep them safe a little longer. Inside, my husband, Frank, sat at the table scrolling through his phone, his reading glasses perched low on his nose. He looked comfortable, unburdened. That should have comforted me too. But something about the way Lila had held me lingered in the air like smoke. "She's been visiting again," Frank said casually, without looking up. "Yes," I replied. "She goes every Tuesday." He nodded, still scrolling. "Takes a lot out of her." The sentence landed wrong. I turned slowly. "What do you mean?" Frank paused, thumb hovering mid-scroll. He glanced up at me, then away, like a man realizing he'd stepped onto thin ice. "Nothing," he said too quickly. "I just mean, you know, it's not easy." My heart did something strange then. Not a full stop. More like a stumble. "Frank," I said, keeping my voice even, "what's not easy?" He sighed and set his phone down, rubbing his forehead. I shouldn't have said anything. That was when I knew. Because in all our years together, 32 of them, Frank had never been one for drama. He avoided secrets the way some men avoid vegetables. If he said something and wished he hadn't, it meant it mattered. "Please," I said. "If there's something about our daughter I don't know, it's not my story to tell," he interrupted gently, finally meeting my eyes. "I thought you knew." The kitchen felt smaller suddenly. The walls seemed to inch closer, the ceiling lower. I leaned against the counter to steady myself. "Knew what?" I asked. Frank hesitated, then shook his head. "Forget it." I misspoke. "But you can't unring a bell. And you can't put a sentence back into a mouth once it's spoken." That night, I barely slept. I lay awake listening to Frank's breathing, counting the seconds between inhales, replaying every visit Lila had made over the past 6 months. Every tired smile. Every excuse. Every time she said she was fine in that clipped, careful way that means anything but. In the morning, I watched her childhood play out in fragments around the house. Her graduation photo on the hallway wall. The dent in the door frame where we'd marked her height every birthday until she outgrew the ritual. The chipped mug she always used, still sitting in the cupboard even though she hadn't lived here in years. Lila had always been the responsible one. Even as a child, she was the girl who noticed when someone else was hurting. The one who gave up her dessert because Mom, he looked sad. The one who learned early how to make herself smaller to make room for others. I'd been proud of that. God help me, I'd been proud. Our life before all this had been simple. Not perfect, but real. Frank worked as an insurance adjuster. I taught 3rd grade at the elementary school 2 miles away, the one with the cracked playground and the librarian who smelled like old paper and peppermint. We'd raised Lila and her younger brother, Marcus, in this house. Sunday dinners. Movie nights. Arguments over curfews and college choices. The ordinary stuff that makes up a family. When Lila moved out after college, she'd promised she wouldn't become a stranger. And she hadn't. She called. She visited. She brought laundry when her washer broke. She still cried on my shoulder when life overwhelmed her. So when her visits started becoming more frequent, every Tuesday, like clockwork, I didn't question it. I told myself she just missed us. or needed a break. Or maybe she was helping a friend. Lila was always helping someone. She's got a big heart, Frank used to say. I nodded along, never asking who that heart was bleeding for. The first real clue came quietly, the way most truths do. It was a rainy afternoon, the kind that turns the world gray and makes even coffee taste tired. Lila stopped by unexpectedly. She sat at the table, hands wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking from, staring into nothing. You okay? I asked. She smiled. That same careful smile. Just tired. I noticed then how thin she'd gotten. The faint shadows under her eyes. The way her shoulders curved inward, as if bracing against a cold only she could feel. You've been tired a lot, I said gently. She shrugged. Life. I let it go. Mothers learn when to push and when to wait. Or at least we think we do. After she left that day, I found the mug still warm, untouched. I stood there holding it, feeling heat where her hands had been, wondering what kind of exhaustion doesn't even let you drink tea. The truth, when it finally came, wouldn't arrive all at once. It would come in pieces, in silences, in words not meant to be heard. And it would begin with that one careless sentence my husband had tried to take back. Because Lila wasn't just visiting someone. She was giving something away. And it was costing her more than any of us knew. The next Tuesday, I paid closer attention. Not in an obvious way. Not hovering or prying. Just watching. Mothers learn how to do that without being seen. It's a skill built over years of bedtime checks and silent prayers. Lila arrived just after lunch. The rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy and damp. She shook out her umbrella by the door, droplets darkening the mat. Her hair was pulled back tighter than usual, like she'd needed control over something, anything, before stepping inside. Hi, Mom, she said, leaning in for a quick hug. It was shorter this time. Her body stiff, as if she didn't quite belong in the embrace. Tea? I asked. She nodded, settling at the kitchen table. The same seat she always chose. The one with the loose leg we never bothered to fix because she said it gave the table character. As the kettle warmed, I watched her hands. They trembled slightly when she picked at a hangnail. She pressed her thumb hard against her ring finger, a nervous habit from childhood. You driving far today? I asked casually. Just across town, she replied. Too quickly. I poured the tea, set it down in front of her. Chamomile. Her favorite when she was anxious. She didn't touch it. Across town could mean anything. Hospitals. Nursing homes. Shelters. Old neighborhoods where the houses leaned toward each other like tired friends. So I said, sitting across from her, how's work? She gave a non-answer. Busy. I waited. Silence can be more persuasive than questions. She glanced at the clock. I shouldn't stay long. You never do anymore, I said softly, not accusing, just stating a fact. Her eyes flickered to mine, then away. I'm sorry. For what? For everything. That stopped me. I reached across the table, placed my hand over hers. Her skin felt colder than it should have. Lila, sweetheart, you don't owe me apologies for living your life. She swallowed. I know. But her voice wavered, just a little. When she left 20 minutes later, I watched her car again, the same way I always did. But this time, I grabbed my coat. I didn't plan to follow her. Not consciously. I told myself I was going to the grocery store, that I needed milk, or bread, or some excuse that made this feel less like betrayal. But when I pulled out of the driveway and saw her turn right instead of left, away from the shops, I followed. At a distance. My heart pounded harder than it should have for a woman my age, but I kept going. She drove slowly, carefully, as if conserving energy. She stopped at a red light and rested her head back against the seat, eyes closed. Just for a second. That image lodged itself somewhere painful inside me. She turned into a quiet neighborhood I barely recognized. Older homes. Narrow streets. The kind of place where the trees had outlived the people who planted them. She parked in front of a small, beige house with peeling paint and a sagging porch. I drove past. I didn't stop. I couldn't. I told myself I didn't need to see more. That knowing the address was enough. That night, I confronted Frank. Not dramatically. No raised voices. Just the two of us sitting at the kitchen table after dinner, plates cleared, the sound of the dishwasher humming in the background. You said something last night, I began. About Lila. He sighed, already tired. I was hoping you'd forget. I didn't. He nodded slowly. I figured. I leaned forward. She's going somewhere every Tuesday. Somewhere that takes a lot out of her. And she's coming back looking like she's losing pieces of herself. I need to know why. Frank rubbed his hands together, a nervous habit he'd picked up years ago. She asked me not to tell you. When? A few months back. She stopped by when you were at work. My chest tightened. And you agreed? I didn't know how else to support her, he said quietly. She didn't want to worry you. I let out a bitter laugh. By carrying it alone? She thought that was better, he said. She always does. The room felt heavy. The hum of the dishwasher grew louder, like it was trying to drown us out. Frank, I said carefully, who is she visiting? He hesitated. Then, finally, he spoke. It's her aunt. The word hit me like a slap. My sister. I whispered. Frank nodded. Yes. I stared at him, my mind scrambling. My sister, Helen. Estranged. Complicated. The woman who had drifted in and out of our lives like a storm we learned to board up against. She's sick, Frank continued. And alone. I closed my eyes. Memories rushed in Helen's sharp tongue, her unpredictable moods, the way she leaned on Lila even when Lila was just a teenager. The fights. The silence that followed. She asked Lila? I asked. No, Frank said. Lila found out on her own. Of course she did. She didn't want you involved, he added quickly. Helen, I mean. And Lila. She didn't want to reopen old wounds. I stood up abruptly, pacing the kitchen. So my daughter is taking this on by herself? She insisted, Frank said. Said she could handle it. I stopped, turned to him. Can she? He didn't answer. That was answer enough. The next Tuesday, I didn't follow. I waited. When Lila came back later that evening, I was ready. She walked in slowly, shoulders slumped, eyes dull with exhaustion. She didn't even look surprised to see me waiting in the living room. You know, she said softly. I do, I replied. She sank onto the couch, her strength finally giving out. For the first time in months, she cried. Not loudly. Just quiet, shaking sobs that soaked into my shoulder as I held her. I didn't want you to worry, she whispered. I stroked her hair, heartbreaking anew. Oh, sweetheart. That's what mothers do. And in that moment, I understood the hidden cost of her visits. She wasn't just giving her time. She was giving herself. Lila didn't pull away right away. She stayed there, folded into me like she used to when she was little and scraped her knees. Her tears soaked into my sweater, warm and quiet. The kind of crying that comes from holding everything together for too long. I didn't think it would be like this, she said finally, her voice hoarse. At first, I thought I could manage it. I didn't interrupt. I just listened. Sometimes that's the most honest love we can offer. She called me, Lila continued. Out of nowhere. I hadn't heard her voice in years, Mom. I almost didn't recognize it. My sister. Helen. The name alone carried weight, old arguments, slammed doors, apologies that never quite landed. We'd grown up close once. Too close, maybe. Until life pulled us apart in ways neither of us knew how to mend. She said she didn't have anyone else, Lila whispered. And I believed her. Of course she did. What's wrong with her? I asked gently. Lila took a breath. Her health is failing. Not one big thing, just everything. She can't keep up anymore. She forgets things. Gets confused. Some days she's sharp and angry, other days she's just scared. I closed my eyes. I pictured Helen alone in that sagging beige house. The porch I'd seen from my car. The peeling paint. The quiet. She didn't want you to know, Lila said quickly, as if defending her. She was embarrassed. She said you'd judge her. I felt a familiar sting. And what did you think? Lila hesitated. I thought she was still my aunt. That was the betrayal. Not a dramatic one. Not shouting or slammed doors. Just the slow realization that my daughter had been quietly absorbing the weight of a woman who had never learned how to carry her own. She leans on you, I said softly. Lila nodded. Every visit. How? She wants me there all day. She forgets to eat unless I remind her. She talks about the past over and over. About mistakes she made. About things she can't fix anymore. Lila's fingers twisted together. She cries when I leave. My chest tightened. And you? I drive home and sit in my car for a while, she admitted. Sometimes I can't even turn the key. I thought back to all those Tuesdays. The tired smiles. The untouched tea. She doesn't want help, Lila added. From anyone else. Just me. I leaned back, studying my daughter's face. She looked older than her years. Like someone who'd been carrying a load meant for many. Lila, I said carefully, this isn't fair to you. She flinched. I know. Then why keep doing it? Her eyes filled again. Because if I don't go, she'll be alone. There it was. The sentence that had probably haunted her every week. I took a slow breath. Sweetheart, being alone doesn't mean you have to destroy yourself to fix it. She shook her head. You don't understand. She keeps saying I'm all she has left. That sentence burned. Because I knew my sister. I knew how she clung when she was afraid. How she confused need with love. How she pulled people into her gravity until they couldn't breathe. And I knew my daughter. She's taking too much, I said quietly. Lila wiped her eyes. I can handle it. But her body told a different story. The tension in her shoulders. The dark circles under her eyes. The way her voice trembled even as she insisted she was fine. That night, after Lila left, Frank and I sat in silence. I didn't realize it was this bad, he said finally. She didn't want us to, I replied. He nodded, shame flickering across his face. I should have said something sooner. Maybe I said. But now we have to decide what to do. Over the next week, I watched Lila more closely. I noticed how she flinched when her phone rang on Tuesdays. How she canceled plans. How she laughed less. The truth wasn't just that my sister was sick. It was that my daughter was quietly sacrificing herself to ease someone else's burden, because that's who she'd always been. The next visit came with a breaking point. Lila didn't come home until after dark. I was pacing when I heard her car pull up. She walked in slowly, face pale, movement stiff. What happened? I asked, already knowing it was worse. She fell, Lila said. Helen. She tripped in the kitchen. My heart jumped. Is she okay? She refused to go to the hospital, Lila said. Yelled at me for suggesting it. I guided her to the couch. And you? She sat down heavily. I tried to lift her. I couldn't. She screamed at me for not being strong enough. Tears spilled again, this time mixed with anger. She said if I really cared, I'd stay the night. That I'd quit my job if I had to. I felt something shift inside me. A line crossed. That's not love, I said firmly. Lila looked at me startled. She's scared. I know, I replied. But fear doesn't give her the right to consume you. Lila stared at the floor. She told me not to tell you this. I reached for her hands. That alone tells me she knows it's wrong. The betrayal wasn't that Helen was sick. It was that she was using my daughter's kindness as a lifeline without regard for the cost. And the cost was starting to show. That night, I made a decision. Not out of anger. Out of love. Because sometimes protecting your child means stepping into a mess you'd hoped never to touch again. I didn't tell Lila what I was planning. Not right away. Some truths need time to settle before they're spoken aloud. And some decisions, especially the ones that reopen old wounds, have to be carried quietly until you're strong enough to set them down. That night, after Lila went home, I stood in the bathroom staring at my reflection. The woman looking back at me had more gray than she used to. More lines around the eyes. Lines carved by years of holding things together. Helen and I hadn't spoken in almost a decade. The last time we did, it ended the way it always did, with accusations, with her crying and me leaving, with promises to talk again soon that neither of us believed. I told myself distance was healthier, that letting go was a kind of peace. But peace, I was learning, can come at a cost too. The next morning, I called in sick too. Work. The words tasted strange in my mouth. I was never sick. I was the teacher who came in with a cough and a pocket full of lozenges, who told her students to wash their hands and keep going. That day, I drove across town. The beige house looked even smaller up close. The porch sagged under the weight of neglect. One step creaked loudly when I climbed it, announcing my presence before I even knocked. The door opened slowly. Helen stood there, thinner than I remembered. Her hair, once carefully styled, hung limp around her face. Her eyes widened when she saw me, shock first, then something like fear. "You shouldn't be here," she said. I met her gaze steadily. "Neither should my daughter." Her jaw tightened. "She told you." "She didn't have to," I replied. "I have eyes." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between sisters is a special kind of heavy. It carries history, regret, all the things that were never resolved. "Come in," Helen muttered finally, stepping aside. The house smelled like old furniture and something sour beneath it. The living room was cluttered with pill bottles, half-read magazines, unopened mail. Evidence of a life slowly unraveling. "You look tired," Helen said sharply, as if pointing it out might give her some control. "So does Lila," I answered. She flinched. "I didn't ask her to do all this," Helen snapped. She offered. I took a seat across from her. "And you let her?" "She's family." "So am I." Helen scoffed. "Where were you?" The question stung because it wasn't entirely unfair. "I was protecting my peace," I said honestly. "But I didn't abandon my responsibilities." Helen's eyes filled with tears, though her voice stayed hard. "You always think you're better than me." I sighed. "This isn't about us." "Isn't it?" She shot back. "You walk in here after years and decide how I should live? Decide how much help I'm allowed?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm deciding how much of my daughter you're allowed to take." That landed. "She's strong," Helen said quietly. "She can handle it." "She shouldn't have to," I replied. "She's exhausted. She's hurting. And she's too kind to tell you no." Helen turned away, gripping the arm of her chair. For a moment, I saw not my difficult sister, but a frightened woman, watching her independence slip through her fingers. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "I don't know what's happening to me." I softened then. "I know. But using Lila as your only support isn't the answer." "What choice do I have?" she whispered. "There are others," I said. "Home care, social services, medical help. People trained for this." "I don't want strangers," she said sharply. "I want family." "And that," I said gently, "is where it becomes unfair." Helen's shoulders slumped. "I didn't mean to hurt her." "I believe you," I replied. "But you did." We sat in silence. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, just like the one in my kitchen. Time, marking what we avoided. "I'll help," I said finally. "But not like this." Helen looked up. "What does that mean?" "It means I'll be involved," I said. "It means Lila won't carry this alone. And it means you'll accept outside support, whether you like it or not." Her mouth opened to argue, then closed again. "You're serious?" "I am." The shift was slow after that. Not miraculous. Not easy. I made calls. Doctors. Community resources. People I should have called years ago, but didn't because it was simpler not to. Lila resisted at first. "She'll be angry," she said. "She'll feel betrayed." "She already is," I replied gently. "And so are you." The first Tuesday Lila didn't go alone. She cried in the car. "I feel like I'm abandoning her," she whispered. "You're setting boundaries," I said. "There's a difference." At Helen's house, the tension was thick. But it cracked slowly, like ice under careful steps. A nurse visited. Meals were delivered. Conversations shifted from demands to logistics. Helen still struggled. Some days she lashed out. Some days she apologized. But Lila started sleeping again. Eating. Laughing in small ways. One evening, weeks later, Frank made an offhand comment at dinner. "She seems lighter," he said. "Like she's not carrying the world anymore." I watched Lila smile, really smile, for the first time in months. And I understood then what my husband's careless words had exposed. Not just the truth about my sister, but the truth about my daughter. Her kindness was never the problem. The problem was how easily the world took advantage of it, and how long it took us to notice. The hardest part wasn't confronting my sister. It was watching my daughter learn how to step back without breaking herself in the process. Change didn't come cleanly. It never does. It came in small, uneven steps. In awkward conversations. In moments where Lila second-guessed herself and moments where Helen tested every boundary we tried to put in place. The first real test came on a Tuesday evening. Lila was supposed to come over for dinner. I'd made her favorite lemon chicken, roasted potatoes, the kind of meal that feels like home without announcing itself. Frank set the table. The house smelled warm and familiar. At 5:30, her phone rang. I watched her expression shift as she listened. Her shoulders tensed. Her free hand curled into a fist. "She's upset," Lila said quietly after hanging up. "The nurse left early. She says she needs me." I waited. I didn't jump in. This was her moment. "I told her I couldn't come tonight," Lila continued, her voice trembling. "I said I'd check in tomorrow." My heart swelled and ached at the same time. "And?" I asked. "And she cried," Lila whispered. "She said I'm all she has." There it was again. The sentence that used to pull her under like a tide. Lila swallowed hard. "I almost went anyway." "But you didn't," I said. She shook her head. "No." I stayed. We sat down to eat. Lila barely touched her food at first, pushing it around her plate like she used to. As a child when she was nervous. But slowly, bite by bite, she ate. It felt like a small victory. One no one else would see. The consequences came quietly too. Helen stopped calling as often. When she did, her tone had changed, less demanding, more brittle. Pride wounded. Control slipping. "She sounds angry," Lila said one night. "At you." "At me." "That's allowed," I replied. "Anger doesn't mean we're wrong." Weeks passed. Word began to spread through the family, not dramatically, not with scandal, but with that subtle hum that follows truth once it's been spoken aloud. An aunt mentioned Helen's condition at a gathering. A cousin asked if she needed help. Offers came. Some sincere. Some awkward. All of them reminders that Helen wasn't invisible anymore. And with visibility came accountability. Helen couldn't pretend she was managing on her own. Couldn't quietly drain my daughter without anyone noticing. The world had eyes now. One afternoon, Helen called me directly. "I didn't want it like this," she said flatly. "I know," I replied. "You made it public." I made it honest. She was silent for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. I didn't realize how much I was asking of her. "That doesn't absolve it," I said gently. "But it explains it." Helen sighed. "I don't like needing help." "Neither do I admitted. But that's not the same as refusing it." After that, something shifted. Not everything, but enough. Lila still visited, just not alone. Not every week. Not at the cost of herself. Some visits were quiet, others tense. But they no longer ended with her sitting in her car, staring at the steering wheel, trying to remember who she was before all this. One Saturday morning, she came over early. "I slept in," she said, smiling sheepishly. I forgot what that felt like. We laughed. The sound felt unfamiliar, like rediscovering a song you loved years ago. She helped me fold laundry. We talked about small things. Work gossip. A movie she wanted to see. Marcus's latest disaster of a haircut. At one point, she grew quiet. "I thought being strong meant never saying no," she said. "I thought love was endurance." I folded a towel carefully. "Love is honesty. Even when it disappoints people." She nodded slowly. "I wish I'd learned that sooner." "So do I said. The public consequence wasn't dramatic. There were no confrontations at family dinners. No shouting matches. No villain dragged into the light. It was quieter than that. It was the shift in how people treated Lila, no longer assuming she'd be available, no longer leaning on her first. It was Helen learning, reluctantly, that care comes in many forms, and not all of them are personal sacrifices. It was Frank admitting one night, "I didn't see it. I should have." "It's hard to see what feels normal," I replied. And it was me learning that protecting your child doesn't stop when they grow up. It just changes shape. The healing didn't arrive all at once either. There were setbacks. Days when Lila cried anyway. Days when Helen lashed out. Days when I questioned whether stepping back into my sister's life had been worth the cost to my own peace. But then there were moments like this. Lila, sitting on the couch, feet tucked under her, laughing at something ridiculous on television. And I knew. The hidden cost of her visits had been her sense of self, her energy, her joy. And now, slowly, she was reclaiming them. Not by abandoning anyone, but by choosing herself for once. Healing doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with speeches or clean endings. It shows up quietly, sometimes so softly you don't notice it until you realize you're breathing easier. That's how it happened with Lila. One evening, months after everything began to shift, she came over unannounced. No Tuesday pattern. No tired eyes. No tight smile. I had a free night, she said, almost surprised by the words herself. We ordered takeout and sat cross-legged on the living room floor like we used. To when she was in college, curtains spread between us. She talked about work, real work complaints, not the distracted kind. About a promotion she might apply for. About a weekend trip she was considering with friends. Plans. It struck me then how long it had been since she'd spoken about the future without hesitation. She's doing better, Lila said suddenly, pushing noodles around her container. Helen. She nodded. Some days are hard. But it's not all on me anymore. I watched her closely. And how does that feel? She thought for a moment. Relieving. And guilty. Both at the same time. That's normal, I said. Guilt is loud when you change old roles. She smiled faintly. I still hear her voice sometimes, telling me I owe her. That family sacrifices. And what do you tell yourself? That I can care without disappearing. I reached across the floor and squeezed her hand. Pride swelled in my chest, not the loud kind, but the quiet, steady kind that settles deep. Helen and I spoke more now. Not often. Not warmly. But honestly. One afternoon, she said something that surprised me. I didn't know how empty my life had become until other people came into it, she admitted. I used to think help meant weakness. And now? I asked. Now I think refusing help was just another way of being afraid. We weren't sisters the way we once were. Maybe we never would be again. But there was a new understanding between us, fragile, cautious, real. The reckoning wasn't cruel. It was humbling. And that made all the difference. The real resolution came quietly on a Sunday afternoon. Lila and I were walking through the park near my house. Leaves crunched under our feet. The air smelled like damp earth and early autumn. She stopped suddenly, watching a little girl chase pigeons near the fountain. I used to think love meant making yourself smaller, she said. I followed her gaze. What do you think now? That love should make room for you too. I nodded. That's a hard lesson. She exhaled slowly. I'm glad you stepped in. So am I. There are moments in parenting when you realize you're no longer teaching your child how to tie their shoes or cross the street, but how to survive the emotional currents of the world without drowning. This was one of those moments. I'd learned something too. That silence can enable harm. That good intentions don't erase impact. And that sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is interrupt a pattern, even if it makes people uncomfortable. The house feels lighter now. Not because everything is perfect, but because nothing is hidden. Frank and I talk more openly. Lila laughs more freely. Even Helen, in her own way, seems steadier, no longer gripping one lifeline so tightly that it snaps. I still think about that sentence Frank spoke so carelessly that night. Takes a lot out of her. He hadn't meant to expose anything, but he did. And in doing so, he gave us a chance to see what had been quietly draining our daughter one visit at a time. The hidden cost wasn't money. It wasn't time. It was love given without limits. And love, I've learned, needs boundaries to survive. There's a particular kind of silence that settles in after the truth comes out. Not the heavy kind. Not the kind filled with regret or blame. But the quiet that follows honesty. The kind that lets you hear yourself think again. When I look back now, I don't feel anger. I feel clarity. I see how easy it is to mistake endurance for love. How often we praise the ones who give the most, without asking what it's costing them. How quietly the kindest people in our families disappear into other people's needs because they were never taught they're allowed to say no. I almost missed it with my own daughter. I told myself she was strong, that she was capable, that she would speak up if it became too much. But strength doesn't always announce pain, and capable people are often the ones who suffer in silence. If my husband hadn't spoken that one careless sentence, I might still be telling myself everything was fine. I might still be watching my daughter grow smaller, week by week, calling it devotion instead of depletion. What saved us wasn't confrontation. It was attention. Noticing the weight in her shoulders, the tired smiles, the visits that took more than they gave, and choosing finally to step in. Because love shouldn't demand that you vanish. It shouldn't require you to give until there's nothing left. And it shouldn't ask you to carry someone else's burden alone. If you're listening to this and thinking of someone in your life who's always fine, always available, always carrying more than their share, I hope you look a little closer. And if you're the one who's been giving without rest, I hope you hear this. You're allowed to set boundaries. You are allowed to protect your peace. And you are allowed to choose yourself without guilt. Would you have stepped in the way I did? Or have you ever been the one quietly carrying the weight? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. And if stories like this matter to you, stories about family, truth, and the courage it takes to stop disappearing, please subscribe and support Auntie Diaries. Because sometimes, the smallest words reveal the biggest truths.